All right, so we are going to be doing section 2.1c, okay? Now, this is solving absolute value equations. Now, first let's discuss the idea of the absolute value. So, an absolute value is basically a distance from zero. So I'm going to kind of put that right here. Um, the absolute value tells you the distance from zero. Okay, so a lot of times teachers in the elementary school may not tell you that. A lot of times they just say, oh, whenever you see the absolute value of a number, the absolute value is like magic and it makes every number positive, right? So it doesn't matter what number you use, it's always positive, okay? So it doesn't matter whether the number on the inside is negative. If the number on the inside is positive, the result is always positive. And that's kind of what they told you. It's just this magical thing, right? So just do it. Well, the reason why it's always positive is because it's a distance, okay? So if you think of this as a number line here. Oops, hold on one second. If you think of this as a number line, so we could say this is -1, -2, -3. Here's 0, 1, and 2. If we put a dot here at -2, the distance to 0 is 1, 2 units. Hey, remember, distance cannot be negative. Your PE coach can say, okay, go run a mile, and then when you get back here, I want you to run it backwards. And then when you come back, you're going to be fully energized, right? You can't undo it. It doesn't matter which direction you run. It's still adding to you being tired, right? It doesn't get any better. So when you're doing these things, you have to understand distance can never be negative. So if the absolute value is a distance from zero, then it doesn't matter which side you're coming from. It's still going to be a positive value. Right here at half, we'll say this is half right here. The distance to zero is still half. Okay, so that's the whole idea. Now, how many points on a number line have the same distance of 2, let's say? Is there another point that you can see on that number line that has a distance of 2 as well from 0? Which number? The positive 2, right? This one right here. So how many answers are there that have the distance of 2? There's 2 of them. The absolute value always has 2 solutions unless it's 0. Okay? If it's 0, then it's only, if they say what's the absolute value of 0, well, that's 0, because how far is 0 away from itself? 0, like there's no distance. Okay? And it's not plus or minus 0, no, it's just 0. Okay? Now remember, I'm going to write this down one more time here. I know I said it. Distance cannot be negative. So, the absolute value of a number cannot equal a negative number. All right? Make sure you remember that, because they always put one of these in homeworks and in tests, and they're like, what's the absolute value of x equals -5? What's the answer? Well, a lot of people will say, oh, well, 5, because there's a -5, so it has to be 5. But remember, what we're saying is that the distance of a number from 0 is -5. Well, distance can't be negative. So that means that answer doesn't exist. Okay? So make sure you remember that distance cannot be negative, so the absolute value of x cannot equal a negative number. Okay, there's one problem like that on your homework. Okay, just so you know. Um, so let's go ahead and try some of this. I'm not going to do that problem because I basically already gave you the answer for it. But let's do an example here. So all of these are going to be a solve each. Oops, that's a Q, not an A. Solve each equation. Here's example number 1. Remember, all these come from your homework, so don't forget to write these things down, or else you're just going to have to do them on your own. So remember, I told you I like to start easy and then we move on, right? So here's the first example. The absolute value of n, so in other words, the distance of a certain number to 0 is 6, right? So what are my solutions for this? What number is 6 units away from 0? Go ahead. 6 and negative 6. Okay, so n would be negative 6 and 6. Okay, now that notation right there is called set notation. Okay, in case you didn't know, I'm going to put it right here. Set notation. You use that whenever you have more than one solution. So if you have like 2 answers, 3 answers, 8 answers, you can list them in set notation and just separate them with commas. I'm pretty sure you've seen this before, but if not, then here's your introduction to it. Okay, but I'm pretty sure you guys have done like domain and range before, right? Does that sound familiar? Domain and range on graphs? So you've had to use set notation there unless your teacher decided not to. But I mean, there's always many other places. So anyway, that was pretty easy. No big deal, right? But then we get to actual bigger equations. Now, these are still not considered like super difficult, but they do get a little more tricky. So one thing that I did not do in example 1 is I didn't break it apart. I didn't break it apart because you don't need to. Those are easy. You don't have to split them up. Okay? But once you start getting more stuff in the absolute value, then you have to start breaking this problem up. Remember, how many solutions does an absolute value normally have? 2. That means, unless it's 0, and then in that case we get 0 or just a single answer. But like in this case, we're only going to get 1 solution, but you'll see why. So we know we're supposed to get 2 solutions. Usually one is positive and the other one is negative, right? So that's what I'm going to use. This is how I'm going to break this apart. Okay, so check this out. When you have an equation that doesn't look like example 1. Example 1 is pretty easy, straightforward, no big deal. But once you get an equation, some type of expression inside of the absolute value, you're going to want to break it apart. This is how you break it apart. The first equation you write looks identical without the absolute values. Okay? So the first equation looks identical just without the absolute values. The second equation looks identical, but you're supposed to put a negative on the other side. Now, is there such thing as a negative 0? No. So in reality, if I simplify that right side, isn't this equation the same as the other equation? Yeah, so I don't really have to solve both. I just need to solve one. Okay? So I'll just solve the one on the left. So let's go ahead and solve the one on the left here. I'm going to add 2. And I get my answer. V equals 2. And that's it. I'm done. If the equation on the right side would have looked different, then I would solve for that one, and that would give me my second answer. Okay? But there are no 2 answers, because even if I went through and solved this one, I still get the same answer. right? So there's no two solutions, just one. Okay? So, but this is the practice when you're trying to solve an absolute value equation, break it apart, two pieces. Okay? You're actually doing two actions, just so you guys know. If I can really quick just sneak this in. You're supposed to flip the sign. You see how it right there, how I put it in green? You're supposed to flip the sign, but when you flip an equal sign, what does it look like? Still looks like an equal sign, right? So there's no need to flip the equal sign here, and also change the number in the back as a minus. This will be important when we do inequalities, because a less than will flip to a greater than, or a greater than will flip to a less than. So things will change. Equal signs don't matter. They're still equal. Okay? So that's why I didn't bother saying like, oh, we got to flip the equal sign right now, because there's no need to do that. All right, example number 3, trying to get a little bit more difficult here, okay? So the absolute value. All right, so we're back. So example 3, 10n plus 8 in the absolute value equals to 62. All right, so we have this absolute value of 10n plus 8 equal to 62. Okay, we are going to break this apart, just like I mentioned. Anytime the expressions start to get more complicated, we have to break it apart. Unless there's just like a single variable inside the absolute value, you don't have to do that. You can kind of just think about it and you're good. But for most of these, you have to break them apart. So let's go ahead and do that. Two pieces. One of them is going to say 10n plus 8 equals 62. What's the other one going to say? Anybody tell me? Uh-huh. There you go. That's the only change. Just a little minus sign. That's it. Now remember, you're supposed to flip that equal sign, right? But it doesn't do anything, so just leave it alone. But there's supposed to be a minus there. And now just solve two equations. So this is what I mean by every problem becomes two problems, right? Well, pretty much every problem becomes two problems. So let's go ahead and subtract 8 on the left side. We're going to start solving here. So I get 10n equals 54. Okay, and then we divide by 10. So n is equal to 5.4. If you want to use a fraction, you could do 27 over 5. That'll work as well. So both of these are okay. Whichever one you want. All right, now we got to solve the other side, and then we'll put our two answers together here. Let's subtract 8. So this is 10n equal to negative 70, right? So when I divide by 10, what's my answer? Negative 7. So I got two solutions. Negative 7 and 5.4, or 27 over 5. Depends which one you want to write. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write the fraction. The reason why is because a lot of people, they can do fractions, but then if I tell them what's 27 divided by 5, they're like, I don't know, it's something, right? A lot of you guys don't convert it to decimal quickly, so I don't mind if you leave your answers in fractions. That's okay. All right? If you want to break it down into a decimal, go ahead. The only reason why this one was easy, you guys know the tricks to dividing by 10 or 100 or 1000. Did they ever teach that to you guys? So let's say I had 254. If someone told me to divide it by 10, all you do is you move the decimal one time over. That's it. If they want you to divide it by 100, you move it one more time. By 1000, you move it one more time. So 254 divided by 1000 is 0.254, right? That's how you divide by 10. So that's why the 54 divided by 10, I did it like that, because I'm like, oh, that's just a decimal move. That's all. That's easy to do. Okay? I didn't literally do it in my head really quick. I'm like, oh, yeah, my answer. It's just a trick. That's all. It's just a quick trick. So, so there's our answer for that problem. So let me see. Let me try to get to another type of problem here. We'll do this one. Trying to move on to things that look a little bit more challenging. That way, we're doing different types of problems for you, not just the same looking ones. I mean, in a sense, I'm looking for the ones that look scary. A lot of times, the ones that look scary, if there's a couple of them, people get scared. They don't want to try them because they look too difficult. And I try to at least do one that might look a little weird. And that way, you're not afraid of trying it. That's usually one of the biggest problems with students is that they get scared of doing the problem. They don't want to get it wrong, so they don't even try it. And I tell them, well, if you don't do it, then it's wrong anyway. You might as well try it, right? So, yeah, always try it out. All right, what's my first step here? Should I break this apart immediately? I mean, I could do that. There's nothing wrong with breaking it apart immediately. Can I make it look nicer by doing something? I mean, what bothers you about this problem? The fraction, right? The fraction bothers me. I hate fractions. So how do I get rid of division by 7? What's the opposite? Multiply, right? Let's multiply by 7. So I'm going to get this, and I'm going to multiply it to the other side. Okay? I want this to look normal. All right, there we go. Now it looks kind of normal. And now I can break it up into 2 parts. So I'm going to give you guys about a minute, 2 minutes. Go ahead and do it. We're going to check answers, okay? All right, anybody have possible solutions here? Any answers you want to tell me? Brave souls. Can't always get everything right. Don't be scared to be wrong. It's okay. I make tons of mistakes. Negative 19 and what else? 37, okay. Anything else? No? I see a couple people shaking their heads. I think you guys all got that. All right, so we're going to go with that. So let's break it apart. V minus 9 equals 28, and V minus 9 equals negative 28. All right, so we add 9. We get V equals to 37, so that's good. We subtract 9. I'm sorry, not subtract, add 9. V equals negative 19. So there you go. Our answers are negative 19 and 37. So good. All right, so we're going to do one more, and then we're done. I'll give you guys the homework so you guys can work on that. Like I said, doing this process isn't that hard. It gets more difficult when we start doing inequalities, the less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Then people start to mess up because they forget to change signs, and things start to go all crazy. So we want to make sure that you get this part first, and then we'll teach you guys the other stuff after. All right, so last one. This is similar to what you're going to see on what I told you would probably be the toughest problem. Okay? Just that the toughest problem has a bigger expression inside of the absolute value. Okay? But this is very similar. The steps you're going to take will kind of follow. All right, what should I do first? Should I break this apart or should I clean it up a bit? Yeah, let's clean it up. What should I clean up? All right, the 8 and the plus 2, but I don't want to add those because the 2 is actually multiplying something. But what can I do with the 8? This one right here. I want to get rid of it. Let's subtract it, right? Let's get rid of it. Right now it's a positive 8, so we'll do minus 8. So this just comes out to 2, absolute value of 8x equals 0. Now remember, that 2 is multiplying. So how do I get rid of the 2? If it's multiplying. Divide, right? I get to divide. So absolute value of 8x is equal to 0. Now this one you actually don't have to break it apart if you don't want to. I think you could probably figure this out. 8 times what is 0? 0, right? And is there a plus or minus 0? No, right? There's no two answers. But if you were to break it apart, this is what it would look like. Which is basically the same thing, right? So at that point, you just divide by 8 and solve. So we'll just divide this one by 8. But you guys could have solved it before. Remember, you don't have to solve this one right here because this is just a copy, but if you really wanted to, you would get the same answer. Okay? So there you go.